Welcome, ladies and gents. I'm Dan the Man Muñoz, host of Movie Menu Interviews, where we interview up-and-coming filmmakers to discuss their films from idea to completion. On today's episode, we'll be interviewing filmmaker Jordan Horowitz, writer and director of the film Painless. I'd like to take this time to welcome Jordan to the show. Thank you so much for being here, Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure. So the reason why we do this show is to discuss the process for future filmmakers out there, to talk about what worked, what you would change for your next project, and any advice you'd like to give to our listeners. So it's very awesome that you're here. Jordan, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up? And how did you get into filmmaking?
Sure. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. I've kind of always dabbled in filmmaking. It was always something I wanted to do my whole life. Even I was one of those kids who was running around with cameras, shooting stuff with my friends. And I went to film school in Colorado.
Were you always like the camera guy, or did you take turns like being an actor as well? And
I did a couple of things that I was in, but I generally tried to stay behind the camera. I like the pretty people go in front of the camera.
Oh.
But yeah, no, it's something I was always very passionate about my whole life. I went to film school. I moved out here actually right after.
Which film school did you go to?
CU Boulder, University of Colorado at Boulder. And my thesis film won some awards there.
And was your focus on directing?
It was.
Or writing?
Yeah. Well, both. Writing and directing, yeah. And then, I moved out here and tried to, break in like everybody else.
Hey, you made it onto our show. That means you're doing a good job. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I got my start, as like a camera assistant, a PA to camera assistant. Then I started getting into editing, and eventually ended up moving to New York, where I got a job as a producer at MTV. And then
I saw that you did videos for like Bam Margera.
I did, I worked with Bam a lot actually.
Yeah,
guys,
that's pretty awesome.
People like that, a lot of reality stuff. And then we actually did a couple movies, which is really cool. Our parent company, funded the movie Crazy Heart with Jeff Bridges.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Yeah, so I got to be on set for a lot of that. I got to interview Robert Duvall, and he's talking to me about Apocalypse Now. They're just blowing my mind, like hearing those stories. And then after a while, I'd gotten to the point where narrative filmmaking was always my passion,
right.
And MTV was fun, but it obviously wasn't that. So I left that, and before I did my first narrative film, I had learned about this idea for a documentary, and I decided to actually do that one first.
Yeah, so let's talk about you back in film school.
Okay.
And what you learned in there.
Sure.
What was your first thesis? What was your thesis film on?
It was called Night, and it was about this crazy tow truck driver. It was based on a true story. It's very much a taxi driver.
A true story that you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. Happened to me and a buddy of mine. We were snowboarding in the mountains on Valentine's Day, and on the way back, he had this cheap piece of crap car. On the way back over the mountain, his engine exploded. And
no way.
Yeah, and we didn't have cell phones. This is way back in the day. I mean, we had to hike like a couple miles to get to a payphone. And I think I called my dad in Connecticut and got his AAA card number, and was able to use that to get us a free tow all the way from the mountains back to
beating
Boulder.
The system.
Yeah, we kind of beat the system. But this guy that picked us up was completely insane. He was straight up taxi driver.
No
Travis
way.
Bickle. Yeah, I mean, we were he was smoking weed on the way home and drinking and just telling us these crazy stories. And then he got pulled over and he totally lost it.
Was this during the middle of the day or nighttime?
It was nighttime. It was
so it was pretty scary then.
It wasn't really scary. I mean, it was kind of fun, but it was kind of very weird, very surreal. And when he got pulled over, I was like, oh man, this is not going well. But it ended up working out fine, and it actually made for a really funny short story. So.
And how was that process for making your thesis?
It's actually a great story. My teacher in film school forbid me to do it. He told me he'd fail me out of the class if I tried to make it. Thought it was
how come?
He thought it was way too complicated and that I wouldn't be able to pull it off.
And you were like, I'll show you.
No, actually, my argument was okay, it's complicated, but you're my teacher. Maybe I'm not there yet, but help me get there. That's your job. Teach me. And all he wanted was 2 people talking in a room. And that's pretty much what this was.
For a thesis?
Yeah, I actually did try to write that story to please him, and I couldn't do it. Every idea I came up with was terrible, and I'm like, I can't do this. This story is where my passion is, And really, it wasn't actually that complicated. It was two people talking in a tow truck. And because, he read on the page, moving tow truck, night, it's either raining or snowing. I think it started snow and then we switched it to rain. But I actually sought out, this cinematographer came and spoke to our school. I think it's the only time it had ever happened at that point. I forget his name, but he had done Rambo. He did the original Rambo, First Blood, and just a bunch of great, I think he did Warriors. And I stood up in the group and I told him about my project and asked him for some advice. And he drew out this whole Venn diagram of like how he would do it. And like we basically did the entire thing in my garage, and it looks like you're in a moving car. We faked a rain machine by getting like a Home Depot pesticide sprayer. And
oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, we did it for like nothing, and it looks great. Like you would, without knowing that ahead of time, I don't think you would really know what we did. And it was funny though, because when my teacher is the one who had to present me with the award, and he was not happy about that.
Take that.
But it got me my first job. When I first moved here, I was trying to get PA work, but in the camera department, because I just always loved camera. And this DP saw it, and he told the director to hire me. And I started as a camera PA, and by the second day, I was a full-on AC.
That's awesome. So, just go with your gut. Yeah. If you think you can do it, that's pretty amazing.
The other cool thing about that was everyone in the class kind of wanted to stick it to him. So the best people in the school like volunteered to work on it. So it looked really good for, a student film at the time, just because I had these like super talented people working on the film.
Do you still have a copy of it?
I'm sure I do somewhere, yeah. Some guy actually...
you should post it on Vimeo.
No, I don't have it on Vimeo, but I do have it somewhere, and I probably could. It's very dated now. I mean, it's black and white, 16 millimeter, many years ago. But yeah, I'd love to do that.
Oh, you shot on film too?
Yeah, back then everything was film. Like all my early projects were all film. All my early shorts, a couple of music videos and things. I came up on film. I was definitely one of those guys who was like a film snob.
Did you have to do digital when you worked with MTV? Because that's pretty much all they did, right? So I can see why you left. So let's talk about your documentary, Angel of Nanjing.
Okay.
Where did you hear the story about this man who patrolled the bridge, the Yangtze Bridge?
The Yangtze River Bridge.
Wow. Where did you hear that story from?
So originally a friend of mine sent me this little news blurb. I think it was CNN or something. It was a really small blurb, like less than a paragraph, just about here's this guy doing this thing in China. Basically, for those of you who don't know, it's the story of a guy in China who patrols this bridge voluntarily, which is one of the most popular places in the world for people to commit suicide. And he's just a regular guy. He's a good Samaritan, and he spends all his free time on the bridge saving people and then helping them with their problems. And since he started, he saved over 300 people.
The trailer is amazing.
Thank you.
That alone, I was already hooked on it. And you said that they did an article on it on Now This News, right?
After our film came out, Now This News got wind of it, and they did a video on it on Facebook, and it blew up. It got, I think it's up to like 22 million views or something like that. And then not only that, but then like all these other news outlets saw that video and started doing their own videos, and those all kind of had like, some of them had like 5, 6, 7 million views. So it really kind of took on a life of its own after that. It was great.
So how did you decide that you wanted to just focus your subject on this man who patrols this bridge, and how was that process to get that done? Did you have to get its approval? How did that whole process work out?
Well, first of all, I never imagined myself doing a documentary. I was always considered myself a narrative filmmaker, but it was just such a great story. I read about it, and I was like, oh my God, I have to tell this story. So I called a buddy of mine, Frank, and I was like, look, man, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going out there to make this movie. You're in or you're out right now. And he's like, let's do it. So we just pulled our resources. We had almost no money, and we just had camera gear, and we just went out there. We had no plan, which is crazy. Even finding the guy was almost impossible, tracking him down. I was for months, and actually probably for over a year, I was trying to find information on him and a contact, and I couldn't do it. I emailed the reporter who wrote the article. He couldn't figure it out. And eventually I stumbled upon this blog that was all in Chinese. I had no idea what it was, but I saw his picture. And I found a Chinese coworker of mine at MTV, and I had her come in the room and I'm like, explain this to me. Like, what is this? And she's like, oh, this is like his diary, his blog. Like he writes about.
Oh, that's his personal one.
Yeah, like if he saves somebody, he goes home and writes about what happened on that date. And I was like, that's amazing.
That is amazing. Wow.
Yeah, and she's like, his phone number's on there, right? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, it says you can call him if you're depressed. So I was like, call him. That's amazing. So she called him, and she's like, oh, I'm with these filmmakers from New York.
Like serendipity.
It's totally serendipitous. She's like, I'm with these filmmakers. They want to come out and film you. And he's like, come on out. So a few weeks later, we were in China. we met him on the bridge, and I think he had no idea what he had signed up for. He was used to doing interviews at the time. I think he thought we were going to be like a reporter who...
Like a quick thing. Not
a couple
of
days. I stuck a camera in his face for a year.
A year?
A full year, yeah. Yeah, he was... By the end of it, I mean, he loved that we were doing the story, and he loved the footage we showed him. But I think by the end of it, he was like, all right, guys, what are you doing
Bye.
here? Yeah, bye, exactly, yeah.
And how was that process filming for a year? Did you live over there basically the whole entire time you were there?
Yeah, I did it over the course of 2
And how many
trips.
hours of raw footage did you have by the end of it?
Oh my God, hundreds. It's crazy. The thing about a documentary is you kind of tend to just shoot forever. And especially me living in China for a year, Frank and I, there was times where we had nothing to do. So we just go around and get B-roll, or like we would just shoot with Chen endlessly on the bridge. And then there was times where like he would be talking to somebody. We had no idea what they were saying because we don't speak Chinese. So it would seem like this super important stuff. So we'd film the hell out of it. And then, months later when we got it translated, we'd find out, they were arguing about a parking ticket or something stupid. So much footage. Yeah, it was insane.
But that's cool that you decided to tackle that on. How was the process of editing all this together and to create that story? I mean, you already have the narrative there of this man who would walk through the bridge. How was it watching that as well as being there when he was... I know some of the moments you said they looked like it's intense and they would talk about... But how was it like when he... Because there were some shots, that he would pull people down from the bridge. How was it witnessing that? And not as a documentarian, you're not supposed to be involved. You're just watching your subject. How was that?
Well, we did wrestle with that. We asked ourselves, what do we do if something happens? And we basically agreed we'd put our camera down and intervene if we need to. Fortunately, we didn't need to. Chen was always...
He was on top of it.
He's so on top of it.
He seemed like he
was
was
amazing.
on top
he
of
can
it.
spot someone, 100 yards away and know exactly what they're thinking.
And he would just tell him to hop on the back of his scooter. And then...
Sometimes he'd force them to get on the back of his scooter and take off. I mean, he can be very abrasive, if he needs to. He reacts to the person. If the person is being polite and nice, he'll be polite and nice. If the person is completely lost in their own head and won't listen to him, he'll get abrasive and he'll get in their face. And then if somebody's kind of being belligerent or drunk or something, he'll grab them. And I've seen him wrestle people to the ground. Being there filming it, I felt like there's a bit of a disconnect having the camera in front of you. It makes you feel a little safer. And the biggest thing was having Chen there. There was one time where Chen had already gone home for the day, and I actually saw a guy. I had my translator. One of the times where we had a translator, we didn't always have that, but he was on the back of my scooter, and I was giving him a ride home, and I just saw this guy bawling his eyes out, staring over the ledge of the bridge. He was on the phone, and I was like, dude, you got to listen in on this conversation and tell me what's going on. And he's like, oh man, he's like literally giving away his ATM passcode and like saying goodbye to people. And I'm like, you need to do something because I don't speak the language. He's like, and this guy David, who was a godsend, he was super helpful, but he was, he's very young at the time. He's like, I don't know what to do, and I'm like, dude, just be Chen, like just talk to him and tell him we're not leaving this. He didn't want to get on my bike. And I'm like, listen, just tell him I'm not leaving the bridge till you do. And eventually he refused, and we ended up having to call the cops and have them remove him from the bridge.
By you filming that, you just saved someone's life too.
Hopefully, but I mean that was definitely the scariest time. But for the most part, the rest of it wasn't. To answer your other question about editing was an absolute nightmare. And
how long was that process?
Years, literally, because. First of all, this was a down and dirty self-finance project. We had almost no money. Actually, the only way I paid for it, I had gotten rid of my apartment in New York, and the money I normally would have spent on rent in New York, I was able to put towards this. And luckily, living in China is actually really cheap, and so was like hiring translators and things like that. But yeah, I mean, the difference between, narrative and documentary is with narrative, for better or worse, kind of what you shoot is what you've got. Like you know what scene 1 is, you know what scene 10 is. And now, don't get me wrong, there's amazing things you can do in the edit. And my editor, James, was a godsend. He did things I'll never fully understand to like make scenes work and rearrange scenes. But for the most part, you generally know what you have. Whereas with a documentary, we just had terabytes and like 100 and something terabytes of footage. And yeah, you could say we had a general idea of the story. It's about this guy saving people, and it's also about some of these people that he saves and their transitions and how they transform their lives. But we had no idea what any of the scene order was. We had no idea what the chronology of it was. So like, it was just a huge, arduous process. It took literally years to figure out.
And how was it like interviewing Chen in the process? I mean, his daily life and whatnot. How much of that was just him shooting the shit with you guys?
I mean, he definitely shot the shit with us quite a bit. I mean, we'd always go out and get very hammered together. he likes to drink and he likes to smoke, so there's a lot of that going on. But
did he get any donations for this at all? Or
well, the Now This News story, when that came out, the beautiful thing about that was we put a donate button on our website, and we raised like $10,000 for him just off of that. All the money went straight to him. And in China, $10,000 goes a lot further than it does here. And where he was able to put that money was he actually rents an apartment that he calls the Soul Center, which is where he'll take these people that he's rescued that need time to kind of like come to terms with their lives. He'll take them there for several days sometimes, and that costs a lot of money, and he pays for that out of his own pocket, and he makes very little money.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I think that kept it open for like a couple of years.
That's incredible. Like, commend both of you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
For telling that story. How long did it take you to actually finish the process? How many years completely?
Well, we started shooting 2010 into 2011. We did it over the course of 2 trips, like I said. And then it's one of the things that took forever also was we had to get all of our footage translated so that we could understand it. And then we had to subtitle all of our footage so we could edit it. And we had like hardly any money. So it was just what could have been done by Netflix in a month or less. It probably would have been done simultaneously while you're shooting it. Took probably a full year. And then the editing was, I said a couple years. I think start to finish, I think we premiered at our first festival in 2015. Okay. So we probably finished the film in 2014 and did the festival run in 2015.
And
came out 2016.
And how did the audience respond to it?
It's great. We won an award at almost every festival we went to, except like 1 or 2. We played all over the world. People have written me emails. People still contact me on Facebook and tell me how moved they were by it. I've had a great. I had nothing but great response from it. It was kind of. I kind of got spoiled my first time out because if you look at all the reviews online, there's virtually no criticism of it. Everything's praise, 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 and that just doesn't happen, especially in narrative. People always
have an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, what's your favorite movie or one of your favorite movies?
Star Wars.
Okay, so there's somebody out there. There's somebody out there bashing Star Wars right now.
Totally.
I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. But what I learned from this, which is actually an important lesson, is that if you can pull the heartstrings, especially in documentary, people will look past all of your flaws. Like, this was a down and dirty, low budget production. Like, there's some shaky footage in there. We were hundreds of yards away sometimes filming him on a bridge that was like vibrating from all these cars, like, because we don't want to be intrusive. And like, it's not a perfectly shot film, but people don't care. Like, they're so invested in the story. Like,
yeah, they can forgive it.
Yeah, in documentary, people do not care.
Yeah, no.
In narrative, in
documentary, you can get away with a lot more.
Yeah, and in narrative, it's like people will pick apart every single frame of your film if they can. People go in, especially critics, they go in looking for things to pick apart.
Now, you've discussed that you mainly like to tell narrative stories. Now, could you see yourself doing another documentary in the future? Yeah,
I'm actually working on one right now. I've just started doing some preliminary test shooting. We haven't gotten too serious into it, but I definitely got the bug. I still consider myself a narrative filmmaker, but I definitely did get the documentary bug while I was doing it.
Nice. Now let's go ahead and talk about your narrative film, Painless. Can you give a synopsis for the film?
Sure. Painless is a story. It's about a guy named Henry Long who has a real medical condition. He can't feel physical pain. He can feel everything else, but not that. He just can't feel pain. And as a result of that, he feels very kind of like an outcast. Imagine, if you will, like a modern day Edward Scissorhands type of guy. He doesn't know how to interact with people very well. He feels like people don't, he has no part in culture, so he stays away from it. He's kind of locked up in this room, which is a homemade lab, because he's trying to find a cure so he can quote unquote feel normal. That's pretty much the premise of the film.
Cool. Let's play a little clip from it.
Cool.
Pain. suffering due to bodily harm. It's nature's way of protecting us. But every once in a while, nature makes a mistake.
Oh my God, your hand. Are you okay?
If it is possible to take away the sensation of pain, then we must also be able to create it.
Get that crazy idea out of your head before you do something stupid.
Tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm a scientist.
Which field?
You're a genius, Henry, you know that? There's this guy I've been meaning to talk to you about.
I've never come across anyone like you. A body immune to pain in every way.
You want to study me. I don't have time for distractions. Did you know that an average glass of water actually has 15 different kinds of medications in it?
You're kind of strange, aren't you?
I can give you what you want, Henry.
Yeah, what's that?
Pain.
Where did you get the idea for this film, and how long did it take you to write it down and to where you wrapped post-production?
I got the idea. I was living in New York at the time, and I was looking for my next project. I kind of knew roughly the type of character I wanted to write about. I was looking for like my version of a taxi driver kind of story, lonely, alienated guy. It's something I'm heavily drawn to in my work. And I had read about these kids who couldn't feel pain. They had this condition. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I just started doing some brainstorming. And I'm like, I wonder if this scenario would work in the type of character I want to write about. And like literally the light bulb went off like instantly. It was all in one sitting. I remember the coffee shop I was sitting at, and I texted a friend of mine and I was like, I think I just found my next idea. And then it took years. It took just years to write. I had this idea before I even shot my documentary.
And while you were filming the documentary, did you write ideas down?
Oh yeah, the whole time. I mean, there's a lot of downtime in China, and I was always going to a tea shop or a coffee shop literally every free moment, not free moment, but free day I had, and just writing. And right when I got back from China, I almost immediately went into pre-production on this film.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Where did you do your research for this? You said you read an article about these kids. And did you dive more into the research of what the syndrome was?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the hardest parts of writing this script and telling this story, is that it's based on a real medical condition. And I'm the type of person.
Do you know the actual?
Yeah, it's called CIPA, congenitive insensitivity to pain with androsis. People with this condition, their nerve endings which are responsible for giving the pain signal from your brain to your body aren't firing. Like, they're just not there, actually. It's a genetic mutation. And, actually, you just reminded me of something. I don't know if you read, there's this article that came out recently on this Scottish woman they discovered who can't feel pain. And it's crazy. It was all over. Literally every news outlet in the world was talking about this amazing story. Like it had never happened before. And, I've been doing tons of research on this, making the film. My film had already come out at the time. So I was like, she's not the only one. Like, There's actually a lot of people that don't have this condition. I mean, but yeah, anyway, what was really interesting about this article is that one of the things they mentioned in there is that now scientists are actually studying her, thinking they can use her condition as a way of helping people with chronic pain. Oh. Which is amazing, because that literally is the plot of my movie. Yeah, there is a scientist in my movie studying Henry because he thinks it'll help people with chronic pain, and more specifically his specific condition. And it's actually very closely related. They both have a problem with their sodium channel, so it makes complete scientific sense that he would be doing that. So that was really interesting. And there is a ton.
So your film has basically grown into a documentary now.
I guess. You
just can't escape it.
I can't escape it. But yeah, there was no mention of my film in any of those articles. But no, you asked about research, and one of the reasons it took so long to write is because I'm the type of person that I need everything to be completely scientifically accurate, or as much as humanly possible. And a lot of people have said, "Oh, this movie is a science fiction movie." And I say it's not. It's a medical science fact movie, because all the science is completely real in this movie. He's trying to cure himself, so we really had to go into what all the science behind that is. And I have no science background at all. I knew nothing about this stuff, so I really needed to get an education in this. And I actually, while I was writing the script, had a team of 3 science advisors. We would meet regularly. And
where did you find your science advisors?
Hugo was my main science advisor. I started with him. He was the main guy for the bulk of it, and I found him on Craigslist, and we just met.
Naturally, where you just find anything.
I like Craigslist. I've had good luck on Craigslist. People bash it, but I've had good experiences. I found great roommates on Craigslist too. But anyway, we would meet regularly and kind of go over the science of it, and I would tell him okay, this is where I want the story to go, but we need something scientifically that will make that work. And he would try to come up with scenarios. And eventually this expanded into 2 more science advisors who I can't remember if he referred them or we got them on Craigslist also. But it actually, part of the reason why it took so long to write, in addition to that, and in addition to the fact that I'm just a naturally slow writer, I just overthink every possible outcome for a character and write every possible direction a script can go. And I hate that I do that and write like so many drafts, but it's just the way I am and I can't help it. It got to a point, you've seen the film, and I'll try not to spoil this, but there's a point in the film where Henry kind of needs to have his big idea moment, like the aha moment where he discovers this thing. So the problem is which
is a funny mechanism that he used in the film, because he does that quite a few times, and it's really funny.
Nice.
It's really great. Go on.
The problem we had was that there's no science to put there. There was we had used everything we could use in the film at that point. I'm like, but he's got to have this moment. And while I was in China making my documentary, I put the script down for a very long time, and I was just randomly Googling the condition. And at the time, if you Googled the condition, literally everything you saw would say it's a condition of a mutation of the NTRK1 gene. And for some reason, I landed on this paper in China that had just come out where this guy's saying, actually, no, I think in some cases it might be this other gene, the SCN9A gene, that very closely resembles that gene. He had this theory, and I showed that to my science advisor, and he's like, oh my God, that's amazing. He's like, this is it.
A breakthrough.
And not only that, the SCN9A gene is a sodium channel problem, so it perfectly ties into what I was trying to do with the scientist, Andrews, who's trying to study him for his own benefit.
Right.
So the whole thing, literally, when I had that discovery, the entire script came together like immediately. And that's why when I got back from China, I jumped, I'm like, we're doing this. Yeah. And the real funny thing is if you look up the condition now, almost everything you see on the internet will say it's the SCN9A gene, and there's almost no mention of the NTRK1 gene anymore.
Wow. Yeah. So how quickly the medical science just moves on.
It all changed.
So in this film, you also work with animals, like
we do. Yeah, we work with mice. None of them were harmed, by the way.
That's
they were all given homes after the film.
How was that? How was it working? Because I don't think any of the films that people that we interviewed had to work with animals before. How was it working with mice?
We've had mice in this film. We had 2 kids in this film. We had a baby and a young kid.
Already breaking the rules.
And we had a very difficult actor who I will not name, but I would say we had all 3 of the things you should not ever have in a film. Obviously,
was the actor okay? Like, was he scared of the mice, or was he?
No, Joey didn't care. He's a bit of a germaphobe, but no, he didn't care at all about working with the mice. They were in a cage almost the whole time. He takes them out at one point, but it's for a very simple shot, and no, he was fine about it. The mice were fine. The only time it was an issue is if you remember earlier on in the film, Henry has this serum that he injects with the mice to see if they feel pain. So we had to get a very specific shot of this mouse. We had no money for CGI, obviously.
Right.
It had to be doing a very specific thing that it's the way it licks itself is the way a mouse would actually lick itself because of what the serum contains. And whereas if the serum worked, it would be in pain and it would be a very different response. But if it didn't work, it would just be licking the spot where you injected it. And we were shooting, I don't know, man, it felt like hours, probably not that long, but it felt like hours of these cages of mice. And at one point my DP, and I kept like telling my DP what I was looking for, and I kept telling him where to point the camera. And at one point he looked over at me, and I could tell he's like, I don't know what the hell you're looking for. But I'm like, I'll know it when I see it. And all of a sudden I saw that shot, and I'm like, that's it, shoot that. And I was like so excited. I'm like, we got it, did you see it? And I could tell he was just looking at me like, dude, I don't even know what you're talking about. But it worked, it's in the movie. And Liam, by the way, is an amazing DP. I'd highly, highly recommend him. I think he did a great job.
Nice. Speaking of which, let's talk about your cast and your crew. Where did you find your cast? How did you audition them? Did you know that any of the actors prior to?
None, zero. We kind of like scoured the earth.
Where did you film it?
We shot it in New York and parts of Rhode Island. My producers were based out of Rhode Island, so they had some good connections to locations and stuff. So we kind of split it up. You were asking me about cast. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was really hard because first of all, we had no money. I don't know if you know, this film was shot for $50,000. So it was super, super down and dirty.
Congrats.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. The problem was I wanted it to look like a $500,000 film. So that is really hard to do. And I think in this day and age, it's a lot easier to get better production value with little money. It's still really hard. I'm lucky that I had an amazing production designer and I had an amazing cinematographer. But what's really difficult at this budget range is getting good acting. And I think that's the biggest giveaway always. Shooting where we did and with the not having the connections that other people have, I couldn't get a name. And I didn't really care about a name. What I wanted was good actors to play each part. I didn't care what they looked like. I didn't care anything about them except that they're a good actor. And like a lot of people, for Joey, the lead actor who plays Henry, a lot of people said to me, he's not the traditional leading actor look. I'm like, but he's so good.
He's great.
Yeah, I'm like, we have to use him. So I found him in...
And he fits the role really well.
Yeah, he's great. He's got all that angst inside him for real. So it was not a stretch for him. But no, we got him. I mean, we looked everywhere. It was all like... we found him from Canada. I met him through Skype. Somebody showed me his reel. Evelina Marie, who I just love. I think she did such an amazing job as Shaney. That's another role that we were looking for. We spent like 6 months looking for her, and we had met all these we met all these good actresses who were giving, fine performances, but I was looking for something very specific for an Ev that I just was not finding. And somebody, I remember it was like very, very late in the game. I feel bad because this girl was standing outside waiting to audition. And right before she walked in, somebody put a laptop in my lap and it had Ev's reel on it. She'd somehow stumbled upon it. And I watched it and I'm like, oh my God, this is Shaney. Like I'm literally looking at my character, Shaney. So I was like, I auditioned the girl that was waiting, but I knew like she didn't have a shot. I felt kind of bad for her. I was nice to her, don't get me wrong, but there was, in my mind,
it's part of the game though,
yeah, and my mind was just, and we're still friends, but my mind was just totally made up. And Ev was living in LA at the time. We begged her to come out to New York and do it as a local, and she thankfully loved the role and agreed. The Dr. Andrews was a New York local, so that was easy. And actually, Ray, Henry's mentor, he came from LA also. So it was actually really challenging to do. And they're all SAG, which means we had to pay them a little more. So it was pretty hard to do on literally a nothing budget. With $50,000 budget gives you almost nothing for cast. But we were able to make it work, and we were able to pay everybody, all the cast and crew. So it just took forever to do.
Again, congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because it looks great.
I appreciate that. I will say I'll never do that again. And especially coming off my doc, that's 2 back-to-back down and dirty, no-budget films. It's an amazing feeling of accomplishment when you pull it off, but it's so hard to do. It literally ages you in dog years. And I know making all films in general are really hard to do, but doing it for no money is just, oh my God. I feel like you can only do so many of those in your life. And then it's like, all right, we got to get a budget.
So how did you create the budget? Where did you get you say it was $50,000. Did you have any investors? Did you have
it was all like, most of it, to be honest with you, it was mine. A lot of it was personal savings. Every cent I got off the documentary went into it. A little bit I got from friends and family, but not that much. And another reason it took a really long time to complete the movie is because I was funding it as we went along, kind of each step of the way. I'd have to shut down and get a job, like I'd have to, I was doing a lot of corporate videos at the time, which paid surprisingly well. Kind of dried up right after the film because I took a long absence to make the film, which kind of sucks. But again, every cent I made went straight into that. I was living like a college kid, this whole time eating, basically ramen noodles and tuna fish out of a can. It was really hard. And, I remember like when we had to do color correction, I was like, all right, well, I got to go get a job, make some money so we can pay for color correction.
Yeah.
We got into festivals.
That is not cheap.
Yeah. And getting into festivals and like just the whole way, even up until like delivering to my distributors. Like, oh my God, somebody's got to pay for that. And it's going to have to be me.
After you finished, you submitted to the festival circuit?
Yeah, we did.
And how was the feedback for that?
It's good. We got into some really nice fests. We won some awards. Got great feedback. People really responded well to the film. And something that was really cool for me is a lot of scientists came out to some of our screenings and they're like, oh, you really nailed the science. And that was probably my biggest fear, besides like how's the audience going to like it, was, how are scientists going to like it? Are they going to think I'm, pulled it all on my ass or it's real? And they're like, no, like you really, they could tell like you really researched it.
You can tell that you did your homework with
Thank
it.
You.
That's why I had to include that question in this interview because it really sounded legit.
I just hate when I'm watching a movie and like I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a very big Marvel movie that just came out where they invented time travel.
Oh yeah.
And it's like the guy is just like, oh, time travel, boom, 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 here you go. And I'm like, all right, we're not going to invent time travel. We didn't cure this disease, but we put a lot of things in there that make it very plausible.
That's great. Now, what's next for you? So you have your second documentary that you're thinking about, but is there another narrative film that you're thinking about?
I'm always working on a bunch of stuff. I just shot a short film just kind of for fun. I'm writing a couple scripts. I'm attached to a script that we're trying to find money for right now. So always trying to get as many things going as I can. And you never know which one's going to go first. I hate stagnation, and I hate that feeling like so many of my friends have out here where it's just like sitting around, waiting for something to happen. So I'm always trying to create my own stuff. And yeah, a script I'm writing right now, I'm super excited about. So we'll see.
Well, talk about your process for writing.
It used to be very personal. I used to always write I've done a number of short films, and they're all extremely personal things directly from my life. And then as I got into narrative, it shifted to more creating stories out of thin air. But what I realized is they're still always extremely personal. Like I can feel pain, but Painless is an autobiography in a lot of ways. I know what it's like to cut yourself off from life and lock yourself in a room and say, I'm not going to come out because I have no time for distractions till I figure this thing out. He's trying to cure disease. I was like trying to write my script. Yeah. So, and the script I'm writing now is so far from who I seem to be as a person, but there's definitely a significant autobiographical component to it.
Do you feel like that's important for you to always include a piece of yourself into your work?
It is for me. I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, it has to be autobiographical, but it's hard for me to like write. It's easy for me to come up with ideas. I come up with like tons and tons of ideas, but I find I put them away very easily. And it's like, I think having a personal component is what keeps bringing me back to that specific idea. Like I put Painless down dozens of times, when I got stuck or, couldn't figure out the science, but like, I'd always ask myself, well, what is the thing that speaks to me about it? And I was like, okay, I have to write that.
Right.
And the one I'm doing now, it's the same thing. My girlfriend can attest to it. She's seen me bang my head against the computer more times than I like to admit. But, that is all. She
nods her head.
Yeah, I mean, that is the process. But there's something very specific about it that appeals to me that, I'm in it in some way that I feel like I have to express that. And it just keeps drawing me back to it. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing for me. I don't know where ideas come from. I really don't. I know I've got a notebook full of them. I don't, like I said, I don't write them all. Painless, it literally was the minute I read that story about the kids, I knew what my film was, but I didn't know how to write it, and that took a really long time. And the idea I have now, this one has evolved and changed so many times. This is a totally different process, but I feel like it keeps getting better and just evolving. But I'm not sure what the jumping off place. I'd have to think about what inspired that originally. But usually what I find is that, and I kind of get hit with an idea. It comes very quickly. It usually is the driving force the entire way. Like this specific one I'm writing now is a little different, but like Painless, the thing I started out with on day one is still in some way in the movie. It changed a lot, evolved a lot, but that kernel is still in the movie.
That's awesome.
So
it's a seed that's planted that grew into this film.
Yeah.
That's
and then it'll take me, forever to figure out how to write it, like I said. But the idea comes quickly usually.
Is there any last minute advice you'd like to give to people who are starting off as filmmakers, who are doing their projects, starting their documentaries? What would you tell them that you wish you were told when you were starting off?
Well, for people just starting out, I'd say don't wait for anybody. Just go out and make stuff. But one piece of advice that I wish I was told that I wasn't is choose your partners very carefully. I thought I knew that lesson, especially making very down and dirty, low budget projects. A lot of the people that I was meeting were just not on the level that I wanted them to be on, that I felt like I was on, and that I wanted the film to be on. And then, so what happens, the temptation that happens is that you'll meet people that have amazing credits or have other films that you're like, yes, this is what I want this to be. Like you're the man, you're hired, you're the woman, like you're the person I need to work with. But I would say make sure you personally vet them very carefully, find and talk to people who've worked with them directly, and find out what they're like under pressure, because it is like your partners on a film are like a marriage. You're going to be stuck with them for a really long time.
Long hours.
Long hours, long time, and
And depending on what type of project, it's probably not ideal conditions, maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, and I love the grueling aspect of film work. I was all for super long hours, and I told everybody, I need this to be a family environment. We're gonna love each other. We're gonna work really, really hard, but we're gonna create art. But unfortunately, not everybody felt the same way. And we had some, and it all comes down to ego, by the way. And if you have a good sense for that, then if you have your instincts, I should have probably listened to my instincts a little better too. If you're getting an inkling that there's an ego involved, you might want to reconsider that. Yeah, and if you personally vet them and you hear a story where they may have dropped the ball, you should definitely listen, because all it takes is one problem person to really take the fun out of it. And that's the most important thing, is you got to enjoy the process.
That is very important. On a fun note, what are some of your favorite films, and what are some of your favorite directors and has any of those favorite directors influenced your work?
Oh man, so many. Where to start with that one? I mean, Taxi Driver, Requiem for a Dream, The Thin Red Line, Fight Club.
Great movies.
Oh my God, there's so many.
Martin Scorsese, David Fincher.
Oh yeah, I mean, Goodfellas. Got to mention that. Magnolia.
Aronofsky.
Aronofsky, is a huge, huge influence on me. Visually, Fincher's a big influence on me. Christopher Nolan, obviously, he's great. I mean, there's just so many people doing so much great work. And what I love about this industry is, there's room for everybody. Mm-hmm. There really is. I mean, everybody has a different way of telling a story. And I think where I get really turned off watching other people's films is when you could tell they're literally just trying to do something else that somebody else did. Right. And it's like, that's not, you didn't try anything there. You really find what's unique about you, find your voice, do something that you can be inspired by them, but don't do that. Do something different,
right. Put your stamp on it.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, they've all been influences on me in some way. There's so many different influences you could see on Painless. I mean, visually, there's shots, or that Unbreakable even influence. There's a shot when my production designer and I first met, we were doing mood boards and storyboards of, not storyboards of shots, but of what the look and tone of the film is and what the sets should be like. I also do this with my cinematographer Liam, and there's a shot from Unbreakable where Bruce Willis is in the tunnel with his hood up, mm-hmm. and it's raining. And it was such a great influence, such a great influencing shot. So things like that. I tend to pick and pull from a lot of different sources. I tend to I'll look at a movie over here and be like, oh, I like what they did there. And then I'll look at something completely different tone and be like, but I like what they did here too. Let's find a merging or balance of that.
Right. Putting your own twist on it.
Exactly.
That's awesome. If anyone wanted to find your work or see anything that you're working on, where can they follow you? What website? Or are you any festivals at the moment that people can go see?
We're not. Painless actually just recently came out on Showtime. So if you have that, or if you know somebody that has a password, you can watch it for free. It's also on all of the VOD platforms like iTunes, Vudu, Amazon, all that stuff, and Angel as well is on all those platforms. It's actually Angel of Nanjing is streaming free on Amazon right now as well. And then
definitely go check it out, everyone.
Please, yeah. And then my info is at Jordan's Films. That's Jordan's with an S. Facebook.
All one word.
All one word, at Jordan's Films. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those good things. And I'm always posting updates of the crazy stuff I'm working on. So definitely feel free to check that out.
Everyone, go follow him right now. Thank you so much, Jordan, for being on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we call it a night?
No, I just, appreciate you having me. It's been really fun.
Oh, it's been great talking about films with you, man. Make sure to check out Jordan at his social media, his website, and support his films. Also, make sure to check out our website, moviemenupodcast.com. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you'd like to be on the show, make sure to contact us at moviemenupodcast@gmail.com. Thank you, guys. Until next time, we say goodbye.
Thanks.